Okay, and we are on. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our sixth installment of the Poetry Really Matters show. My name is Cendrine, and you are.
David.
Welcome to this installment. We're very happy you're with us. Can't believe it's April already. NaPoWriMo, National Poetry Writing Month. So it's all about NaPoWriMo this month for us as well. We've been busy writing and working behind the scenes to launch a few new things that we are very excited to talk to you about today. But before we do, we would like to read you some poetry, as always. At the beginning of every show, read some poetry. I know, David, you have a piece that you would like to write to us. So I'll give you the mic now.
Thank you very much, Cendrine. So basically, I have something a little different to our fifth episode that we did last month. And last month I did a high bun, and this episode I'd like to read a tanka prose poem, which is a combination of a tanka poem, which is a little bit like a haiku, and also it has a bit of prose at the start. Those type of poems also have a title. So the title for this poem is called Fire Still Flutters There. So I'm going to read this poem, and hopefully you're going to like it. Fire Still Flutters There by David Ellis. Its secret left me so calm with its strange goings on. Fire still flutters there. Motion in nature gives me its moods, seeking a mind to watch with a wild pleasure. Sounds of soothing things swimming, beloved when by my side. Gentle thought thrills heart, tender sky and stars ancient. Image shapes language, spirit sweet the bare night heard, secret of the quiet moon. And that's the end of my poem. So what do you think of that, Cendrine?
Oh, that was lovely as always. Always. Like I've never
Thank
had
you.
anything negative to say about your poetry. I just like it, and people are like, "Well, you're just being nice." No, I genuinely enjoy your poetry always. It has this kind of flow that is unique to your style. Sorry, I've been reading your poetry for a long time now, and I can recognize your style now. It's very obvious, and that's the style that I've always enjoyed. So it flows. It's natural for me. So it's very enjoyable.
It's very kind of you. Thank you.
You're welcome. So my piece now. This is the first poem that I wrote for NaPoWriMo 2020. And this year I've been challenging myself to work with Japanese poetry forms. And I write based on my photography as well. So the first poem that I wrote is a choka. So the choka is a poem that is written in alternating 5 and 7 syllable lines. And it often concludes with an envoy of 5, 7, 7 syllables. What I liked about the choka is that it deals with humanistic topics, especially topics that involve relationships. So my choka is titled Into the Night. Walking on and on along a river we know, sounds of olden days suddenly on the surface. We feel a new hour shall pass again unnoticed until stars gather up and down or down and up. Swiftly our time stops, for hands have found each other as winter's last breath surrounds the departing year. These old stones in light in a city we call home, along a river whose depth can reflect our hearts. Into the night now, before memories escape us, before reflections turn off. And that is it for my poem.
It's really, really wonderful. What I'm finding interesting is that you wrote longer poetry before, didn't you? And then you decided that you were happy with haikus and writing much shorter poetry. And now you've kind of like gone to a lot of different styles that you've been doing through NaPoWriMo for the last 11 days. We're on day 11 now, aren't we? And I noticed that it feels like you're kind of experimenting back with the past again. You're writing longer pieces. Do you feel like they're a lot longer, or do you feel like maybe they're more it's like if you took several haikus and wrote several haikus together? How do you feel about the new forms? Are they do they feel different to what you would normally write? Is it kind of stretching you out of your comfort zone at all? Or?
Yeah, well, I guess because I wanted a challenge. So I really like Japanese poetry forms because they are a lot about relationships, about the relationship between human beings and nature, in particular, the seasons and so on and so forth. So I find haiku very relaxing to write, but the choka is I wouldn't say a long form poetry because for me, it doesn't matter to me if I'm going to write a long poem. What matters to me is basically working with syllables, and the 5-7-5 or 5-7-7 syllable pattern is very, very interesting to me. So at the same time, it's a good challenge, but it's also a very relaxing way for me to write, and it actually fits my style of writing quite well. I don't find writing in free verse as liberating or as easy as it is in with the Japanese poetry forms. So I'm not sure if I answered your question, but it's a little of many different things. So it's kind of hard for me to describe.
Because your poem did sound very relaxing when you were reading it. It just had a nice, like you were saying before with my previous one, is that you still get the flow. I think you actually get extra flow when you use a syllable type sort of structure, because when I find that when you're doing free form, I sometimes have a tendency to I want to insert anything that I want to insert, and then the lines can be all over the place, and it can make it a bit more difficult to read. So unless you practice it, whereas when you've got a structure in place, I feel it makes things easier to sort of slot in, and it makes everything kind of just flow very, very smoothly. There's not going to be any kind of overuse of any words. You're just going to kind of keep it all tight and properly edited as well. Like we've discussed in previous episodes, we say that you don't want to have superfluous words. It's no good having a poem that's too flowery, and when it needs to get its message across a lot more kind of sort of strictly. And that's the benefit, I guess, from having things like syllable counts and structures like that, because you almost know when it's going to begin and end. Sometimes I've found that I'm writing something and I'm just like, do I add more verses or lines, or do I just stop there? And it's nice to be able to just say yes, because I've got that structure in place. That's what I find with found poetry. I have to stop because I've reached the end of the piece, the source material that I'm using, so I have to end at that particular point. And I guess with syllable poetry as well, you get that done. You know when you're going to start, where you're going to end, and because you've got that fixed, it's inspirational, isn't it? Because it means that you can plug something into that. You can plug any kind of sort of theme into that, and then work around that theme, can't you? So
I completely agree with you. It's just and it feels like I find with Japanese poetry forms, and even with a haiku, it's like writing lyrics, almost like writing lyrics. I don't know where the poem is going to take me, but like you said, I know exactly when it's going to start. There's a very specific flow, especially with a 5-7-7 syllable pattern that there will be like a lyrical ending to it, and it has this magic flow. That's why I really like the Japanese poetry forms, and I believe that if you want to be a good poet, and that's just my personal opinion, I might be wrong, but that's how it's worked for me. I believe that to be a very good poet, as well as a playwright or any other kind of writer, you have to learn to write haiku, because you learn to not say much and force people to read between the lines. So that's a very interesting thing about Japanese poetry forms. I thought it was just a haiku, but the more I practiced the Japanese poetry forms, the more I realized that it's the forms in general. So that's fascinating, and that's definitely a great challenge. And there's a couple of forms that I am now going to work with. From now on, I should say, I'm going to work with, in particular, maybe the choka and the dodoitsu as well, which is a another very, very interesting poetry form.
Well, that's the opportunity of a National Poetry Writing Month, because you've got basically 30 chances to try out. If you tried out a different form every time, if you then discover something that you really, really love, you could either write more of them for the rest of the month, or you could just do a different one every single day of the month. And then when you've finished, because we know that there's, say, 50, 60, 100 different actual different types and forms, you might find several that are your favorites, and those are the ones that you can specialize in. But if you stick to the one thing, I think you're going to find it helps focus you, I think, with your inspiration, but it might bore you. I think you need to be creatively sort of stimulated throughout the month. But then I found, as I say, once you've done the 30, if from that point onwards you finish the month and you feel that you only want to focus on one particular style or a couple of styles, then you've already discovered the one that gives you the most pleasure. And you've done that from the comfort of experimentation throughout the month with NaPoWriMo.
That's very true. That's very true. Speaking of inspiration, speaking of creativity, you wrote a very interesting article last Thursday, 2 days ago,
Yes.
about how to create memorable titles. So for those who haven't read the article, I think you can try and talk about it to entice people, because I really, really enjoyed it. So that's your cue now. There you go. Give you the mic.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, ultimately, what we do with our blog at the moment is every Monday we provide 5 things that we love in relation to art. So that's a regular thing we do on Mondays. And every Thursday, we come up with what we call the Poetry Advice Clinic. And we have a topic. We have like one tip or one topic every Thursday that will give you more inspiration and more kind of help and tips and techniques for either creating poetry or marketing yourself, or just really sort of giving you some advice on how to write poetry sort of better. And the one that we created for the Thursday that just passed was creating memorable titles. So ultimately, the article I came up with was based around individual poems and poetry books. And I wanted to really just sort of focus on how you can try to think of ways to make it easier for yourself to actually come up with the titles, because I sometimes find you can start with a title, but then and then work a poem out from there. But a lot of the time, people will do it the other way around. They might write the poem, which is the way I do it. Is sometimes I can start from a title or a line, but usually I tend to write the whole poem first, and then I'm then got to decide how I want to name the piece. And I don't want to give the game away. I don't want to make things too obvious, because otherwise, if a person reads the title and it gives the whole game away of the poem, then they're not likely to actually read the poem. So in the article, I gave 4 different ideas on how to come up with things to not make your title sound too obvious or too repetitious when you create the title. So I'll just read out the 4 ideas that I had in relation to creating memorable titles. One was to look towards the end of your poem for any particular lines that leap out at you as decent titles. If you use lines close to the beginning of your poem, you might end up repeating yourself too soon and boring the reader, or making your poem look a little odd, because you'll have the same line repeated twice near the top. So I always say to look at sort of halfway through the poem or towards the end or in between, to see whether you can come up with a line that might, if it's not too long, it might end up being a memorable title, because you wouldn't take a whole sentence if you're writing long poetry. But if it's a short, a couple of words or few words, then that might make an ideal title. The second tip was to try combining half of one line and half of another, or simply cut out part of a line to make something that is short and snappy. So you could always try blending 2 different lines and switching them around, or even reversing the words if it doesn't make it grammatically incorrect. You might come up with a playful title that actually still reads well if you try the cut and paste method, or just switching the words around. If you're using another poet as a research, like I do for found poetry, where I will use people to be the source of my found poems. And you can try skimming through some of their poems. So say, for example, if I use Edgar Allan Poe to write one of my found poems, I could go through some of his poems, or even the poem that I'm using as a source, and see if there are any random words that he's written that might be relevant for my particular poem, to give it a quirky title. And then the final tip in the article was for in relation to a collection. You know, if you've got a collection of poetry that you're self-publishing, or you've got a chapbook or a full-length collection, what I would try and do is try and find a poem that's most representative of the entire collection itself. So if you've got, say, 30 or 40 poems or 60 poems or however many poems you've got in your collection, you could try to go through them all and see which one is the most relevant one that will make you think, that will tie in all the other poems as well. It might be it's got a specific theme, or it might have a particular kind of kinship with all the other poems, and that is the one that you would use, because then if someone reads that poem, they can easily get an impression of what the rest of the book is going to be like from that particular poem. And that was the whole basis of that particular article, was just to try and give people more kind of ideas on how they can name either their individual poems or their actual poetry books.
Yeah, I like all these tips. And for me, sometimes it's taking a shower. There will be a title that will pop up in my mind, which is extremely funny because I'm in the middle of like washing my hand, everything, and words pop up, and like there's no way for me to stop and write it. So I keep repeating the title in my mind until I'm finally dry and I'm able to go to the computer or write somewhere. So that's another good way of finding titles. I find that the most unlikely places are often the best places to get ideas as well, not just for titles, but in general, because your mind is not focused on your poetry, on your writing. You're just doing something else, so your brain is free to go wherever it wants to go. So it's helpful for your creativity as well, but it sure doesn't beat your ideas. And I remember I was stuck on the title of one of my books, and I remember you telling me, look at your the poem that kind of sums up the entire book that you're writing, and find a line from that poem and use that as a title. And that was a super great suggestion, because that helped me find the title for my poem. So yeah,
it's not an easy process. I think that, I mean, sometimes I feel like if you name lots of them, a lot of the time I've had people say to me, "Oh, I love the title that you've created," and a lot of the time I'm like, "Well, it doesn't. It was just a random line that I took from part of the poem." But I get kind of like when you do it a lot. And you use the technique a lot, just like when you're creating poetry, when you're creating title techniques a lot, you tend to get sort of praised because of the flow of the title as well. I always want something that's snappy, that I don't want to be using words. I think this is very important that I didn't cover in the article, but it's like very important that you don't use too many kind of sort of basic words. Like if you're going to use the words like love and life and stuff, it's like I try to avoid overusing them in my poetry. Sometimes if I do found poetry, those lines or words come up anyway, because I have no choice. I have to use them, otherwise I wouldn't have any words to play with the poem itself. But I try not to make things, as I say, too obvious. If it means a choice between, if I've written the title and I look at it and I just think, is that catchy enough? To me, it's either got to have some sort of rhyming quality or some sort of flow quality, and make me think that's an interesting title. And it's not just, some people, and I've done it with some of my poems. You might just give it a one-word name and it might sum it up really, really well. But I think that you should really try and see if you can write, say at least 2 or 3 words as a minimum, because I think when you kind of restrict yourself to just one word, unless it's a very kind of expressive word, if you just called your poem just love, then it's too basic. And I just feel like you want something to interest someone, but at the same time, you don't want to be overly complicate things, because sometimes I've seen some of these things. I mean, I'm not saying you can't do it. Some of these poets have used a really long title. I had one today with Emily Dickinson, where it was to do with picking flowers, but it was like I'm the one that picks the flowers or something like that. And so it was a really long title, and it worked for that particular poem. But I think you need to kind of just sort of like, I feel like trying to hit the sweet middle sort of spot. And so you don't want something too short and too basic when it comes to its words, but you want something that sounds enigmatic, that's got flow, and preferably might sort of steal from your own words as well. So that when someone reads it, they just go, "Oh, I can see how that ties in." I mean, I kind of, a lot of the time I will use words or phrases completely from the poem, and I'm just thinking, oh, it's so difficult to try and come up with something else to maybe kind of tease the reader or give them some other kind of sort of cryptic sort of clue. But it's always nice to be able to have something that isn't directly related to the thing, and that's why I say it's good to try and think outside the box, even if it's going back to, even if you look at some other sort of similar poems that you've written, it might not be the poem that you're writing. You might find something there and think, okay, that might be a better title for that. But then you've got to be careful that then when you go to that poem, you haven't used up the title on another poem that doesn't then make sense within the context of the words that you've used. So I think it's a balancing act, but I think that you can really work hard to try and come up with something. As I say, if it's got a memorable title, then I think it's going to compel people to look at it. But if it just looks generic and the same as everything else, then you're not going to stand out. And also, when you go to publish the poem, that's saying on a blog or in a book or somewhere, or it ends up online somewhere, you're going to be in a sea of other people that have chosen all the other same basic titles. So I always say to try and be as unique as you can with a title, and then that will make your poem stand out above everybody else's.
I agree. I absolutely agree. And we have Christy with us. She left us a comment, and she says, "Me too, with a shower issue," talking about same issue I have. And I often think of things as I'm about to fall asleep, and Sam, I always think I'll remember it in the morning. Yeah. For me, it doesn't work. I don't know how it is for you, but Christy, for me, it definitely doesn't work. I always forget. So that's why hurry up, dry myself, and then get to write, because I know the next morning I'm out. So anyway, so thank you, David. It was very interesting as always. Now I'm getting more and more exciting. I'm a little afraid now because I'm so excited to announce what we have to announce. So the first announcement we want to make today is our announcement about a new magazine that we are launching. Yeah, that's
yes.
out in the open. We kept that for so long because we've been working on the particulars and so on and so forth, details, working out the kinks and so on and so forth. So now we can finally say it. So we are launching a new magazine called Auroras and Blossoms Creative Arts Journal. So the other journal stays as is with poetry, but this one is a journal that will still feature positive, uplifting, and inspirational art, but we want a mixture of photography, poetrygraphy, like Insta poetry or haiku-graphy, short stories, 6-word stories, and drawings. So it's an invitation to creative artists to submit their art that is as positive, as uplifting, as inspirational as possible. So it's exactly the same idea as our poetry journal, but we are extending it to more art forms. That's what it is. So we are accepting submissions for that new magazine right now. We don't have a deadline because we want to have as many submissions as possible to be able to tell you we're ready to launch. We're hoping that things will happen. We'll be able to keep you updated within the next couple of months. But that's it for me. David, you want to add something else to it?
I just think that we, as you say, we've been working on it very hard, haven't we, Cendrine? And ultimately, we wanted to just have a companion piece to our existing Auroras Blossoms Poetry Journal. We want people to be aware that that's always going to be there. And this sister magazine, it isn't a replacement. It's really a kind of sort of complementary magazine to give us a way to delve into other inspirational art forms. Because we've been sharing a lot of inspirational art pieces recently, and we came to the conclusion that there's graphics and drawings and positivity and all sorts of things and art forms outside of just general poetry itself. And we wanted to offer the chance to submit things for that as well. We were going to include things like 6-word stories, for example, or short stories of an inspirational nature. And that's what I love about the idea that we've had, and the fact that we've actually brought it to fruition now, is that we now have a magazine that can cater for a lot of other different creative art expressional type forms that will be able to complement our existing magazine. And as Cendrine says as well, we don't have to, we're not going with a particular deadline for a while. So we might find that the first issue won't be published for a few months, but we want to see people's reaction to the new magazine. We are open for submissions, and if we get a lot of submissions pretty quickly, then I can't see why we can't end up publishing the first issue very, very soon. So like within the next sort of 2 or 3 months if we get enough submissions. But we'll have to see how it pans out, and because it's new to us. We're established people with poetry. We're on the 3rd issue of Auroras and Blossoms Poetry Journal. We've got many issues to come. We've got many submissions. We've got many great pieces, and this is how we wanted to kind of expand our remit in terms of just giving people positive art to focus on. And of course, by mentioning positive art, that leads us on to our second announcement. So I'll let Cendrine get us ready for that particular one as well.
Yeah, you summed it up really well. So for the next announcement, I am going to show, we are going to show you a video, a trailer that we put out there. So you get the idea, and I think it's better to watch the video to understand exactly what we're all about. So I'm gonna launch the screen, and then I'm going to shut up. So there you go. So there you have it. We are launching a new movement called Po Art Mo, which stands for Positive Art Month. So this movement is inspired by NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month, and NaPoWriMo, National Poetry Writing Month. So we really wanted to spread positive art, especially in this day and age where we need more positivity and people are stuck inside. They don't know what's going to happen to them and what the future holds. So we really wanted to do our share, and we wanted to invite artists from around the world, no matter who they are, no matter what their level is, to contribute to this movement by creating positive, uplifting, inspirational art every day for 30 days in the month of June. So we're calling this Po Art Mo. And there are different ways of participating. So all you have to do is go to the page that we created on our website. So we have a banner, we have a hashtag that you can use, and you can add yourself to a participants list, and so on and so forth. So in June, from June 1st to June 30th of this year, all artists, everyone, we invite you to contribute to spreading positivity around as much as possible. So every day for 30 days.
Yeah, and what's so great about that is that with NaPoWriMo, they don't ever say that you're forced to follow their particular prompts. For example, they give a prompt every day, and you're also not forced to submit to their website every day. So the reason we have the hashtags and the other ways of interacting with the particular month is that if you want to go off and do your own thing, if you don't want to do it every single day, because we know certain types of art forms can be very difficult to do every day, particularly some people, they may be able to draw every day if they've got the inspiration, but they might want to take a break. You might want to take a day off once a week or something to recharge your batteries. But ultimately, by having a whole month dedicated to positivity, we thought that that's why we've been sharing so many kind of positive art things recently, as a kind of sort of build up towards both our brand new magazine and this announcement for this positive art month. Which, when Cendrine come up with the idea, we were just like, I thought this is an amazing idea that is very complimentary, and also it picks a period where you've got your NaPoWriMo in April, and then when that's over with, everyone's going to be sad because we don't have Poetry Writing Month anymore. And then NaNoWriMo, I think it might be in October. There's October Poetry Writing Month, there's November Blogging Month, but then you have, I think, the summer months where there isn't anything much going on in the way of positivity, and we really need positive things to keep us all sane at the moment with everything that's going on in the world. So it's a wonderful kind of way to express our sort of stuff, and not just restrict it to things like just general, even just writers and authors and poetry. We're trying to bring in every artistic endeavor or any artistic creativity sort of type, and that's what's phenomenal as well, because we don't want to kind of just keep it on one level. It's kind of just like all artists that celebrate your skills, no matter what the level. You could be someone that crafts or does embroidery, or as you said, expresses their way through acting out plays. You could be an actor or a musician, or maybe you're someone that even writes song lyrics, or just records beats or something like that. If you do something in Positive Art Month, if you make it all about positivity, we encourage people to say, okay, try and take inspirational themes as your message, so that the art that you create and that you put out there is going to be something that really kind of makes people feel happy and well and better in themselves. And then we can all get through this whole isolation thing that we're in at the moment, and feel a lot better about ourselves. And it'll give you something that even further down the line, you'll be able to look at yourself and just think, wow, I created that in this particular sort of period, and it might inspire yourself again and again. That's the thing I always say about trying to do a good job in inspiring yourself, because if you inspire yourself, then you're likely to inspire other people as well with your art and your general attitude.
And for me also it makes sense, because I'm not just a poet. I've written in many genres, and I'm a photographer as well. So I wanted something that blended in all these things that I've been doing for 15 years now. Hold on. 15 years, yeah. So yeah, that for me was a way to use all my skills and all the art I've been working on, and maybe for me an opportunity to challenge myself to discover a new art form and find a new passion as well. But most importantly, it's about spreading positivity around. We need it more than ever, and since June is also the arrival of the summer too, so it's a good opportunity for us and to be creative. Summer is it's a good season for creativity. I find so. That's what it is. So, a reminder that we are still celebrating NaPoWriMo, and we are inviting you to celebrate it with us. Submissions for our digital anthology, special anthology about NaPoWriMo 2020, submissions are still open. So do not hesitate. Send us your poetry written during this month, the most positive, inspirational poetry you've written during the month of April, and we'll be very happy to consider it.
Yeah, I mean, that particular anthology, Sandra, isn't it? That's it's in addition to our regular submissions, so people can still submit to Auroras Blossoms Poetry Journal, and also now to the new Creative Journal. But ultimately, you get two for the price of one, because we offer the free entry route for singular poems in relation to our general, our regular magazine and in this anthology. But what we're trying to focus on is for people to submit inspirational poetry that was written in this period. Now, you could wait until the end of the month, but we're 11 days in now. So if you've written something that you just think is an absolute belter of a poem that is inspirational, then I would suggest get it to us, because if you get yourself in an anthology, it's going to be publishing credits for you. It's going to be very prestigious. It's going to celebrate the month after the event as well, because we won't be publishing it until either May or June, depending on how many entries we get. And we have to obviously see if we get enough entries to actually launch the anthology. If we don't get enough entries, we can always feed them into our regular magazine. Any that we accept will still be published in some shape or form. But what we really want to do is have an anthology where you're going to get a lot of kind of marketing and promotion from us. And also we get to celebrate NaPoWriMo beyond April, because the deadline is extended to the 15th of May. So if you want to write all of your poems up to the 30th of April and then pick the best ones that you want to send to us, then by all means do that. But I would say that if you've got something that you've written that you really like so far, and then you might as well get it to us as soon as possible, so you've got a chance of being the anthology, and then we can then help keep the flame going. Because I tend to find when NaPoWriMo finishes at the end of April, then everybody goes quiet, and then we're waiting for the next big event to come along, which is why it's so good that we've got this anthology to take us into May. And then in June, we've got Positive Art Month. So we're really keeping the inspirational theme going into future months, rolling on forward once we've left NaPoWriMo behind.
Absolutely. You froze a little bit. Oh, no, you're back. So yeah, absolutely. That's good. So we have things to keep us busy for the next few months to come. And now we have time. So let's take advantage of it. Submit. And as David mentioned, even if we do not have enough entries to fit into an anthology, if we select your poems, they will appear in future issues of our magazine. Poetry Journal. So do not worry about it. Your submissions are not lost with us. And just a reminder that our third issue is available, was released a few weeks ago. So there you go. So you go check it out. It's available everywhere. You can buy ebooks, Amazon, where's it? Barnes and Nobles. Where else are we? Barnes and Noble, Smashwords, Chapters, Script, and so on and so forth, and Kobo too. So do not forget to check it out. And it's always a good idea anyway for those who are interested in submitting poetry to us, whether it's for the anthology or the issue or the new issues, the issues pertaining to our new magazine about creative arts, because the idea is the same. It's positivity, upliftment, and inspiration. So it's always a good idea to grab a copy of one of our issues to understand the kind of contents that we are after. So go check it out. And if you go to Smashwords, for example, or if you go to Amazon, you can at least look at extracts from the issue. So you can see more or less, I think you can have access to one or two poems. So you would be able to see the kind of poems that we accept in the magazine.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I think it's a huge milestone that we've hit. I remember when we first launched the magazine, we weren't sure how long we were going to carry on for and how we would be received. And we've just had a phenomenal amount of entries. We've had really, really good poetry. We've had the odd bad entry, and we've tried to reflect that in our guidelines. We've tried to be very sort of specific. We try to be very kind of sort of educational with our guidelines. We try to be very fair as well. A lot of the time, we're very, very fair to people. And we only really are kind of forced to reject things if they just aren't suitable for the magazine. And it's unfortunate some people still think that their things are inspirational when they're not quite as inspirational as they actually are. But no, I think we've hit a very, very good milestone with the third issue. We're definitely going to be around for a long time. We have many, many submissions, and we've got many issues that we've got backed up now at the moment. So so we just keep encouraging the submissions, because the more submissions that we get, it will mean that maybe in the future we can even publish even we don't at the moment we're every quarter, aren't we, Cendrine? So we might be able to bump that up a little bit if we get even more submissions as well. So it doesn't hurt us to have an excessive amount of submissions. We always encourage people to say, look, give us your inspirational poetry. We will be fair with it, and we will try to get you published. We'll get you publishing credits for being in the magazine, and we will get you promotion that you wouldn't get off of just submitting, say, like a single poem or a couple of small poems. We fully appreciate people want to create chapbooks and full-length poetry collections, but if you're trying to push an individual poem or even sort of 2 or 3 poems, it's very, very difficult, I think, to get them noticed. And a lot of people realise that it's a good idea to submit and get them into a journal. And we are getting a lot of prestigious looks from a lot of different websites and platforms. That they realise that we're a professional outfit, and that we're doing a very, very good job. And they've accepted us on their platforms, and we get lots of interest from poets and writers and website, and we're on Geotrope now as well. We're on quite a few kind of major platforms that respect the professionalism that we put into the magazine. So as we say, keep coming at us with these poems, and maybe you'll see yourself in neon lights and shining lights soon in the magazine.
Well, and I want to say as well that we're working hard, but we're also having a lot of fun working together. I mean,
yeah,
really, we understand we understand each other. We've grown into having a great working relationship, you and I. So it's fun. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, but I don't think I would be able to do it with someone else, to be honest. So it's fun because I play my part and you play your part, and we each complement each other really, really well in the way we do everything, which is, to me, a winning combo when it comes to having business partners, because business can be hard and poetry is a very hard market to break into. So when you find a great partner, and it's for anyone, even for a book, if you co-author a book or something like that, it's important to find someone who doesn't just understands you and who shares your ideas. It's also important to find someone who understands what it takes to make something work, and who works patiently, who understands the steps involved in developing a good business. So, and once you have developed that kind of relationship, it's a lot of fun, because you share more than just work hours. You share a lot of things, and it's good to have a shoulder not to cry on. It's not what I'm going to say, but you need to vent, you need to do something, and you have someone you can talk to. And this is great because we have actually never met. We've never met. We've worked online together. So it's a good tip for people who are suffering from isolation right now, and you still are interested in starting a project and working on something. You can always find partners online, and you can work with specific partners and people who understand the role they have to play. So if you divide everything well, it's going to work out. So if you're suffering from isolation, you can find, it's time for you to start working on a project and try to find a partner that understands you and that you understand, so you can make things work. I think it's very important, and it has never been more true than now. And I believe, as an artist, that success for indie artists definitely lie in partnerships. So I'm not going to ramble on forever, but I just wanted to add that to the conversation, because I think it's important for some people who are looking for ways to push themselves, say, okay, how to get out of the funk, how to get out of, mentally, of that confinement, or, I feel isolated. So we have a lot of technology. It's time for you to find the right partner and start a venture, start something that will take your mind off of what's going on right now. And I think for me, it's worked like a charm. I don't know for you, David, but for me, it's been a heaven sent, really.
That's very, very kind of you, Cendrine. Ultimately, I think that some people feel like there's a bit of sort of pressure saying, there's a lot of jokes going around saying, I don't know, it was Sir Isaac Newton, I don't know if he came up with the concept of gravity while the plague was going on or something. And then there's other people like saying Shakespeare wrote King Lear or something when there was some kind of rat plague or something. And I think that some people feel the pressure in terms of, oh, do I have to create something for that period? No, you don't. If your life is already full of difficult things, like maybe you've got to look after homeschool your children, that in itself is a project, and I applaud and salute people that have to cope with that sort of situation, because it's very, very difficult for people. They've had kind of thrust on them that they used to have a routine where they were looking after people in schools, and the children were being looked after in schools, and now they're having to deal with it themselves. And I appreciate it's uncertain sort of times. It's very, very difficult. So you don't have to beat yourself up if you've got a lot on your plate and you feel like you should be guilting yourself into doing something creative. But if you're bored, and I could just sit around and watch Netflix all day, or I could just do other sort of things and just entertain myself. I could play video games. I could I would say always try and think about trying to read instead of doing those things. You're not wasting your time if you read, but then you're not, if you want to binge watch your shows as well. It's how people deal with it mentally, how they get through sort of things. It might be that you're still having to work from home, and you want to let off steam. But I tend to find that when I get very, very bored with the sort of things and think, I could just be sitting around procrastinating and wasting my time, I come back to projects time and time again, and that's what really kind of sort of fills my heart and soul with a lot of energy and happiness. And I just think, okay, I'm about to publish another book. Actually, I'm going to be publishing a book tomorrow based around Shakespeare. It's going to be my first in a series. But I found myself, like, whenever I've got a temptation to think, that we're stuck here isolated, and I just want to just enjoy myself, I'm getting enjoyment from the project, because I feel like that's giving me focus. I feel like if I'm being professional about something, I can have fun with it, but it also creates a routine for me. It's like, I know I've done this before, I know how this works. And by giving yourself that routine and that thing to focus on, that makes things easier than, if you were just to kind of wander around aimlessly and not doing anything. So I think either way, if you've got a lot on your plate already, then you don't have to feel guilty that you've got to do something creative or do something amazing with your time. You haven't got to learn a language or do something like that if you haven't got the time to do it, because you're already busy trying to get groceries and trying to look after the children at this sort of time. But if you've got the time and you're bored and you just think to yourself, why am I so bored? What am I going to do? Then I strongly recommend, try and work on that novel that you've pushed to one side for all these years. You've got some time available to you now in these extraordinary circumstances, and you should try to see whether you can do something with that. And if you do something with that and it still isn't going anywhere, then at least you know that it wasn't due to lack of trying or lack of time in the past. It may just be that that's not the thing that you should be looking at. But you could try another skill. You could try and write some song lyrics. You could try and write a play. You could try and write a film. You could be a script writer, or you could even try singing. I find that singing tends to make me feel very, very happy. If I'm feeling down and I want to kind of raise my energy levels, you might want to sing along to a lot of songs that and then maybe record yourself doing that or something. I don't know. But ultimately, just find some sort of project, I think, that gives you some kind of goal or drive or deadline to work for, and I guarantee that'll stop your mind turning to mush and thinking, oh, what am I going to watch on the TV today? I'm not going to get out my pajamas. I'm not going to sit around here. And as I say, I don't judge anybody for doing that, but ultimately, if you're going to be if this is going to go on for a long time, you've got to give yourself some kind of goals and routines to work for, to keep you mentally sort of prepared and sharp and happy to be waking up every day to focus on something. So
Absolutely. I so agree with you. And I'm very excited by your new book too.
thank you.
In any case, thank you all for attending. Thank you to Christy for being there today with us. We wish you a fantastic Sunday. Yeah, Saturday night, Sunday, whatever. I don't remember which day it is. But in any case, we wish you a wonderful end of April. Get writing, get inspired. Don't forget to submit your poetry to us, and we will see you next month. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you very much for attending.